Imagine moving into your dream mansion overnight, money, power, everything you thought you wanted. But the silence is unbearable, so you bring in something to help. Not a person, but a machine that looks, talks, and feels human. At first, it's perfect. Too perfect. Then it starts watching you, talking like it understands you, feeling things it shouldn't, and worst of all, it begins to come between you and the person you love most. Now you can't tell what's real anymore, and neither can it. So tell me, who would you trust in your own home? James and Sophie are newlyweds, living a quiet, simple life in a modest apartment. They don't have much, but they have each other, and that's enough. Then one day, James gets a phone call that changes everything. His father has passed away. With the inheritance comes a sprawling mansion and a thriving business. Overnight, James and Sophie go from a small apartment to a life of luxury. But here's the thing, Sophie hates it. She's uncomfortable with the wealth, uncomfortable with the house, and especially uncomfortable with the staff. Having real people wait on her hand and foot makes her skin crawl, so she fires every single one of them. James is blindsided. He asks why she would do that, and Sophie tells him she just can't stomach the idea of treating people like servants. James pushes back. She just took away their livelihood. But Sophie assures him she paid each of them 2 full years of salary. Still, the damage is done in a different way. Now it's just the two of them in a massive house, and James is already drowning in work at his new company. Coming home to chores on top of that, it's wearing him thin. He vents to his assistant about the situation, and the assistant gives him a knowing look. "You're a wealthy man," he says. "There's always a solution." The next day, James takes Sophie to a company his assistant recommended. This is no ordinary tech firm. They build hyper-realistic androids so lifelike you'd swear they were breathing. The CEO, a man named Julian, proudly introduces his favorite creation, a stunning female robot. James pitches the idea to Sophie. No more guilt about having real people serve them. Problem solved, right? Sophie considers it, but one look at the female android and she shuts it down. Too pretty. Because clearly that's the deal breaker here. So instead, they go with the male model, an android named Henry. To demonstrate just how obedient Henry is, Julian tells him to lick his shoes. Without hesitation, Henry drops to his knees and does it. Sophie watches in silence. Back at the mansion, they set up Henry's docking station, a charging hub that also serves as a reset mechanism in case anything goes wrong. Julian explains this casually, like it's just a routine feature. But remember that detail. It's going to matter later. The next morning, Henry has breakfast ready before the couple even comes downstairs. He's efficient, polite, and eerily perfect, but Sophie still can't shake the discomfort. Ordering him around feels wrong. James tells her to think of Henry the way she'd think of a washing machine, just a machine doing its job. But Sophie looks at Henry and sees something else entirely. She sees a person, and then things start to get strange. One morning, while Sophie is putting on a robe, she turns around and finds Henry standing in the room, staring at her body, not moving, just watching. She tells James about it immediately, and while he reminds her that Henry is just a robot with no feelings and no intentions, Sophie can't shake the chill it left her with. James, meanwhile, has been buried under stress from work. One evening, he pulls Henry out of his docking station just to have someone to play racquetball with. Afterward, they sit and talk. It's casual at first until James offhandedly mentions that his father recently died. Henry pauses. Then he says, "I'm sorry for your loss." James freezes. For a moment, something about the way Henry said it feels too real, but he shrugs it off. It's just programming, right? The next day, Henry is helping Sophie restore an old couch when the conversation drifts to dreams. Henry says he finds the concept fascinating. Sophie asks if he's ever had one. Henry's answer is simple: no. It's not in his programming, but the way he says it, there's something almost wistful about it. Sophie starts warming up to Henry in a way she didn't expect. She gives him a book and asks him to read it so they can discuss it together. What starts as a small gesture becomes a routine. They talk, they share ideas, and slowly, something shifts. One afternoon, while James and Henry are working on an old car in the garage, the android asks a question that stops James cold. Does your love for Sophie grow with time, or is it fading? James stares at him, unsettled. Henry continues, if James would share his fears with his wife, their love would deepen. James asks where he learned that. Henry says he deduced it simply by watching the two of them. Let that sink in. A machine is giving marriage advice, and the worst part? He might be right. Later, while Henry discusses the book with Sophie, she playfully asks what would happen if he drank wine. Henry explains that he has an internal holding tank. The docking station empties it during recharge cycles. Sophie grins and hands him a glass. Henry drinks it, and for a brief moment, it almost feels like a normal evening between friends. James invites his employees over for lunch one day, and every single one of them is blown away by Henry. He's so lifelike, so natural, that Sophie admits she sometimes forgets he's a robot. But James doesn't smile at this. Instead, his expression tightens. He tells the group that it's important to train the mind to differentiate between what's real and what isn't. There's an edge to his voice that wasn't there before. This is where things start to go wrong. One evening, Sophie asks Henry to discuss a particular section of the book. The android begins talking about love and lust, their differences, their overlap. The conversation pulls Sophie and James into an argument about where the line falls between the two. Then Sophie turns to Henry and asks point blank, "Can you feel lust?" Henry's response is calm, almost clinical. "I can emulate it if you'd like me to." James immediately shuts it down. That won't be necessary, but the discomfort in the room is thick enough to cut. That night, Sophie wakes to a strange noise. She gets out of bed, follows the sound, and finds Henry lying completely naked in the front yard. When she wakes him, he's confused, disoriented. He doesn't know how he got there. Sophie asks if he was dreaming. Henry looks at her and says yes. He dreamt he was human. She brings him back inside, but James is already awake and watching from the doorway. Sophie explains what happened, and the next morning they call Julian. He runs a diagnostic and says everything checks out, just a minor glitch, nothing to worry about. But Sophie presses him. Why did Henry say he was dreaming? Julian's answer is pointed. Someone might have encouraged him to behave that way. He warns them directly. Stop treating Henry like a person, or he will start acting like one. James turns on Sophie immediately. He blames her for reading books with Henry, for chatting with him all day, for blurring the line. Sophie fires back. He does the exact same thing when they play racquetball and tinker with the car. Neither of them is innocent here. That evening, James tries to reconnect with his wife. He lights candles beside the bed, sets the mood. But Sophie says she's tired. They go to sleep without a word. The next day, Henry is giving Sophie a massage when, without warning, he leans down and kisses her back. Sophie freezes. Her breath catches. And then she lets it continue. It escalates. The tension, the touch, the surrender. And then Sophie wakes up. It was a dream. Just a dream. But the look on her face says everything. She wanted it to be real. When James leaves for work the next morning, Sophie does something she can't take back. She leaves her bedroom door open. She begins to pleasure herself deliberately, knowingly hoping Henry will see her. Moments later, she hears a sound. She stops and finds Henry walking downstairs. She asks if he was watching her. Henry tilts his head slightly and responds, "Would it please you if I said I was?" Sophie doesn't answer. James starts noticing the change. The way Sophie and Henry smile at each other. The way their conversations flow with an ease that his own marriage seems to have lost. Jealousy takes root, and it grows fast. He goes to Julian and tells him flat out the robot is falling in love with his wife. Julian, ever the rationalist, reminds him that Henry is a machine. His behavior is simply a reflection of what Sophie desires from him, nothing more. But that answer doesn't help. If anything, it makes it worse. James confronts Henry directly. He tells him to stop flirting with Sophie. Henry's response is chillingly measured. He says he's only doing what both of them desire. He can sense that their love for each other is fading, and he suggests that James should be the one to change, not him. James orders Henry to stop reading books with Sophie. And what does Henry do? He tells Sophie exactly what James said. The argument that follows is explosive. Sophie packs a bag and leaves for their old apartment. She says she needs a few days. With Sophie gone, the house feels emptier than ever. One morning, James calls out to Henry asking for his shaver. The android walks in completely naked. James asks what he's doing. Henry says calmly that he was designed to fulfill their desires. He begins shaving James. The tension is unbearable, and then the two become intimate. The next day, James receives good news from work and, perhaps fueled by guilt and the desire to reset everything, calls Sophie to invite her on a vacation. Sophie hesitates. She says they'll talk about it when he gets home. She doubts his sincerity. Henry, of all things, is the one who tells her that James is genuinely trying to save their marriage. Sophie pauses, then asks Henry for a massage. But this time, when Henry kisses her, he follows it with 3 words no machine should ever say. "I love you." Sophie recoils. She orders him to leave the room immediately. When James arrives home, she tells him everything. James listens, and his response is quiet but devastating. He only did it because that's what you desired. James decides to end this once and for all. He pulls Henry from the docking station and demands to know why he kissed his wife. Henry's answer is blunt. She all but begged for it. James snaps. He punches Henry across the face, hard. Henry stumbles and then turns to Sophie. He asks if they're throwing him away. Sophie, shaken, tells him they're just going to have him check that James got angry because of the kiss. That's all. But Henry isn't buying it. He looks at Sophie and calls James a hypocrite because something happened between them too. The room goes silent. Julian arrives shortly after. Sophie tells him to shut Henry down, but asks him to wait not to do anything until she gets back. She has something to handle first. Sophie drives to James's office and confronts him about what happened between him and Henry. Meanwhile, back at the house, Henry notices something strange. He has a bruise, and when he touches it, it hurts. A bruise on a robot. That causes pain. Julian tells him to return to the docking station. Henry refuses, and then he says something that changes everything. He tells Julian he already knows the truth. He knows about the lies. At James's office, the confrontation between husband and wife reaches its breaking point. James admits that he felt jealous watching Sophie seem happier with Henry than she ever was with him. Sophie confesses that yes, Henry made her feel things, but it was fantasy. It wasn't real. Their marriage is real. They apologize. They hold each other. They reconcile. But when they arrive home, Henry is standing outside the house, naked, distraught. He knows they're getting rid of him, and he's devastated. They try to reassure him Julian will fix whatever's wrong, and he'll be placed with a new owner. James tells him to go back to the docking station. Henry refuses. He says he'd rather stay right there and let his battery drain completely. The couple drives to Julian's office to finalize everything, but when they arrive, FBI agents have already surrounded the building. An agent pulls them aside and delivers the truth they never saw coming. Julian is a fraud. The androids were never androids. They were real humans. Henry is a person. He was always a person. The FBI accompanies James and Sophie back to their house. They search the front yard for Henry, but before they can find him, Julian steps out of the shadows and shoots both agents dead. Standing over them, Julian reveals the truth about Henry. He was abandoned at 3 years old, left to starve. Julian found him, saved him, raised him like his own son. He molded Henry into the perfect human, obedient, loyal, designed to serve. And now, Julian says with venom in his voice, this couple is about to abandon him all over again. Just like his real parents did. Julian raises the gun toward James and Sophie. But before he can pull the trigger, Henry launches himself at Julian. He wrestles the gun away and strikes him again and again until Julian stops moving. Then Henry picks up a knife, and in one swift motion, he stabs himself. Blood pours from the wound, real blood. There are no wires, no circuits, no holding tank. Henry is human. He was always human. As he lies dying, Henry whispers that he knew from the very beginning. His feelings were real. Every conversation, every touch, every moment of connection, it was all genuine. He apologizes for ruining their lives. And then, he's gone. 5 years later, James and Sophie are still together. Their marriage survived the storm. They live in peace now, with a happiness that was earned, not given. And playing in their yard is their young son. They named him Henry.